Good morning. So we're now going to continue on with the yellow finch. I have to tell you that we've been having technical difficulties, and the last part of the last session cut off, which was putting in this gray that was in here, and maybe some of these colors here. So if you want to take 2 seconds, pause the video, throw those in. This is just a kind of a darker gray, so dark blue, dark brown, and white, and maybe add a little bit of alizarin into it to kind of purple it up a little bit. And this here is made with yellow ochre, a little bit of burnt umber and or raw umber, whichever one you're using, and a little bit of white. Okay, and now to continue on, so we have this cute little bird, and the paint itself, if you were to look at the painting in life, the paint itself looks like it's, to me, not finished. So let's start. Once again, I have my Master Stroke red sable brushes, and I'm using a 6 and a 2 filbert and a 2 round. Okay, so I'm going to start first with the 6 filbert, and I'm going to knock in some color in the background to try to push him a little bit. I want to make this a little bit darker, and maybe just add some more color to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I took Hooker's green with sap green and olive green, mixed them all together to make a kind of a darker green. And it's going to look very close to this in some spots, but the reality is if you saw it in life, you would see that this is a green and that's a red. And I'm doing that purposely to make them oppose each other because they are complements. And I'm just going to scrub it in there on top. Not too wet, kind of dry. Of course, if your paint that you're using doesn't have a lot of natural oil in it, in the mixture, you might want to thin it out a little bit. Now, I also noticed that his head is up a little tiny bit higher at the peak, so I'm going to leave some space for that. Remember what I said, always redrawing, always. Every painting stroke is a drawing line. This will also make his beak stand out a little bit more. I also noticed, Jack used to do video editing, and he used to make films and stuff. And back then it was 3/4 inch videotape and 35 millimeter film. And so his editing skills were from the way back. And he did some digital editing when it first came out, but now it's changed so much that we're kind of experiencing a bit of a learning curve here. So bear with us. Right now I'm shooting this off of my iPhone, but we did get a Lumix G7 camera, which we're also still trying to learn, and we just haven't got there yet. The other thing that we're going to be doing is we're changing one of our spare bedrooms upstairs into a studio for doing exactly this, videotaping and different lessons and so forth. So it's a complete setup. Where I normally paint at home in my studio at home is just not conducive to doing a large scale like that, just because I paint in a very tiny room. And this other room, although is also tiny, will be bigger and be just used for that. So in the summertime, I plan on doing this continuously, and I'm hoping to do this for a very long time because I do have students that are in various parts of the world, and this way here they'll always be able to continue doing this. In the summertime, I know that it's unsure of what's going to happen with our classes that we normally host in the summer, where we go to the Willows and we have an in-studio class. So the plan so far right now for those is we have to wait to see what the governor says about opening up and so forth, and what our guidelines need to be for following a safe distancing structure. But I'm also going to continue this on. And the three-dimensional studio that we normally do where kids make things, I'm going to do videos of how to make certain things with items that you find around your house, for those kids that are stuck at home, and the parents need some time to work, and they need the kids doing something. So I'll offer those too, which I can't do in this studio, which is the main reason we're opening up the other one. Okay, so I wanted to bring this dark around a little more to give a little more of a dramatic effect. Already I'm getting that. Can you see that? And let's see. This second one that I used was made with sap green and cadmium green and sap green together, and maybe a little bit of olive green, because olive green gives you a nice way of like neutralizing. If you don't have all those colors, neutralize with your red when you're making a green. This is a little too light. I wanted to put it up here. I also wanted to cool this down just a little bit in the back up here to push it back. Remember, cool things are in the distance and warm things are up close. Just gonna rub some of that in, and then I'm gonna bring some of the dark in. This was made with a light green that has a little bit of blue in it. So you could take ultramarine, cadmium yellow, a tiny bit of cerulean, and white to get that color. There was in the photograph a little blurred flower down here, but I'm going to eliminate that. The wonderful thing about doing paintings is you can take a photo you like and you can change it to whatever you want. I often ask people if I can use their photographs because of my mobility issues. It's hard for me to get out to do these photographs. And I always tell them, don't be surprised if the photograph gets changed, because I often change it. Okay, so let's take some of this color here and add it into that. And this color was this one here, which was the, what did I say it was? The sap green and cadmium green. This bird is such a cute little bird. I get these birds in my garden. You can't see it from this video, but just over my right shoulder is a French door that leads out to a garden. And right near there, I have a bird feeder. I put there mainly for my cats, kind of call it kitty TV, where they can watch the birds. I see a lot of these. The females are this is a female. The males are very, very beautiful. They are really more yellow. But the females have this subtlety to them that makes it kind of nice and old-fashioned looking. Where the males would be like, you know, right in your face. I kind of wanted a subtle painting. Okay, so that's probably the background we'll stick with. And next thing we'll go on to is the belly. And I think I'll use my number 2 round. It's very pointy. And his belly is kind of blue here, which I really like, but there is some darker and lighter values in it as well. So let me just, I mixed some colors ahead of time. Let me just check these colors. Okay, so that's a little darker. That's good. So, you know, similar to when we were doing the animals, birds have these feathers. Oh, not dark enough. That are thin, that are fluffy, and kind of like fur. So what you want to do is you want to treat them like fur and go in the direction that they go. So in other words, if you were to pat a dog, you wouldn't pat against the way that the fur goes. It's the same thing with the brush. So you want to go in that same direction. Just going to add a few darks. When I bring a painting up from to this next level, what I do is I go into each color that I've put down, that I've marked where they are, and I look for the lights and darks and the patterns in them. So I saw a few darks in there, and you'll see it too when you look at the photo. And then I saw, and those darks in there would basically be a little bit of a cast shadow underneath the feathers. And then you go in with the lights. And you want to make him really fluffy looking through here, but at the same time you want to bring it out so you're breaking that line. We're always talking about breaking up that line, because in nature there are no consistent straight lines or even curves. You know, I mean, maybe a shell has, you know, consistent curves, but if you looked at it really close, I bet it's made up of a series of planes. So we're just going to add a little bit of white here. And that will tone down. It's actually not white. It's actually a very, very light blue. So it's a lot of white with a little bit of light blue in it. The other thing I noticed when Jack was doing the editing, because the first few times we did this, Jessica and her husband did the editing. And I was having a hard time sending it from my iPhone to their PC, so that's when we decided to do it. And so it's for the first time I'm really seeing these videos, because I don't play them back in full afterwards because it's so long. And I noticed that my hand was covering a lot of what I was doing. I had no idea that was happening. You guys should have told me. So I decided to put the camera on the other side so that you can see what I'm working on. You know, it's all a learning curve. We're learning. We'll get better at this as each one goes. Okay, now we're going to work in this, and we're going to, because I wanted to tone down some of that dark, but I didn't want to completely get rid of it. So now we're going to make this feel like a part of that. And it's actually fairly light at the very beginning of it. So I'm just going to take some white, titanium white, the bleached kind, and I'm just going to pop some of that in there to break up that line. There's actually a little one right there. And it doesn't have to be just strokes. Sometimes the feathers together make a mass, and if you see that, then you put that in. This over here didn't have as much of that as this does right here. Okay, and down through here is kind of getting a reflected greenish color. So I'm just going to take a little bit of light green, put it in with some of the light blue, the medium blue really. Let's see if that comes out a little greener. It's a little too light, add a little more green, a little more blue. There we go. So there's a reflected light in there that's really kind of a pretty color. kind of a light teal. Okay, and I have these darks in here, so now I'm going to add the lights of the gray. Now in the darkest areas, like these here, they're going to be the darkest of the light grays. So let's, oops, I forgot that green was wet. Let's add a little bit in here like that. And in the medium ones, I'm going to add an even lighter one. And some I'm going to add some white, but first let's start with the lighter gray. Now the feathers here are kind of interesting. They go this way, they go that way, they go this way. They're almost like a crosshatch. Crosshatching is when you take one line and you cross it over another line. Kind of creating a, you know, like a tic-tac-toe, only more lines. There we go. Tic-tac-toe. It's so funny, the kids sometimes want me to play tic-tac-toe with them. I don't know what the fascination with that game is. Kids are funny, but things never change. I remember doing that when I was a kid. Another thing I remember doing a lot when I was a kid was knock-knock jokes. And the kids like to do knock-knock jokes like crazy, and nothing more irritating than a kid doing a knock-knock joke, right? So I've come up with a solution, because it can be so distracting in a class when everybody's doing knock-knock jokes and nobody's like painting. So whenever a child asks me a knock-knock joke, they'll say knock-knock. I just say to them, come in. And it stops it right away. Took me years to come up with that one. Oh, look at how fuzzy he's looking now. Wait till we put on the pure whites. See, you know, this looks like pure white until you put it up next to one that is. Okay, and then he's got a few of these little feathers poking out here. Okay, now let's take some pure white. And right there, once again, is where it's really white. He's got a big white mass right here. And he has some up here. And a couple of streaks through here. And then it goes into this. Now, notice how the first thing I did was I put grays on top of that. Imagine had I not done that. That would have really stuck out, but now it becomes part of the environment. It becomes part of the mass that is there. Let's throw some in here. Just scumbling it along a little bit. Okay, now we're going to do, this is really, really white. So let's see if we can get a pure white in there. So there's a mass here. See the difference? This looked really white before, and then I add this. I forgot that this was actually a toned down white in preparation for this white. Now, had I not done that, that wouldn't show up. Okay, and that kind of goes out there. So I think his belly is done. Now let's move on to his head. His head is quite beautiful. Her head, I should say. So I've made several different kinds of greens, lemony greens. I used some lemon yellow and some light blue and some white to get those. And I noticed that right over here, there's a reflected light right there coming around from the side. Then there's this here, of course, that's very bright. So we're just going to pop that in there. And right here. Then there's this darker one that's there, but I'm going to add a little tiny bit. I don't know if this is, because I haven't checked these colors up here, but I just went by theory. There, a little tiny bit of bluish to it. And we're going to bring that around that color there, which is the same color combination with a little more light blue and white. And I'm just going to bring that around like that, so that that becomes like a reflected light. Something's over there that's reflecting light onto him. And then I'm going to take a little more blue with that color. Might need to neutralize it, but let's see. Yeah, we need to neutralize it. So it's a blue-green, so to neutralize blue-green, you would add an orangey red. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of cadmium red light, which has a little more orange to it. You could just use your light red. If it still doesn't neutralize enough, then you can, let me think, what was I saying? I lost my train of thought. So then you can add a little more yellow to your red, if it's not red enough, orangey enough. Okay, we're just going to lighten that up just a little bit. Still a dark, but we're going to lighten it up a little bit. Now we're going to raise that top of his head. So the top of his head is actually some of the grays, very similar to what's on his belly. So, and remember, your green is a little bit wet past that. I left a little space, but it's still a little wet past there. So the grays actually start about here, and they go up here. And I'm going to poke some straight lines up, because it's not a curve. It's a series of lines that are kind of going up like this. And they come down here. Don't forget to save some of your underpainting. That's what kind of pulls it together, is saving the underpainting. And I'm going to add some of those through here, saving the underpainting and pulling it together so that it doesn't seem like just blocks of color. Blocks of color are good in some things, you know. Fairfield Porter was wonderful with that. But that's not what we're doing here. Okay, now his eye. He's got some interesting things going on with his eye. He has a darker gray here that I want to break up the line a little bit. It goes around this part here and kind of up here a little. And then there's one right here that's just inside the pupilly area. Is that a word, pupilly? And then I'm just going to line it with a light again. There. And this line here needs to be broken up. So the question is, what do we break it up with? I think we'll break it up with a little bit of white, because it's pretty light inside there. So we're going to go from the inside out. There. Okay, now he's got this stuff going on right here. And there's already a dark in there. We tucked that in, so now we're just going to add some lights on top. And I think I will use a neutralized green, one of these greens, this green here, neutralized with a little more red and white. You're not going to see the red in it. It's just, but it's there. It's there to assist the color. And we're just going to break that up a little tiny bit. Okay, and then the next one is this collar he has, and it's kind of light, so I'm going to throw a little bit of darks in there because I think we went a little too light with the first one. Just to break that up, but you still see it as a collar. And there's this. This is too dark in what the original is, and that's the darks we tucked in underneath. And so what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to take this color here, and I'm just going to go right on top of it, leaving some of that dark, just scumbling a light on top of a dark to give it that form. And then there's some weird greenish ones down here that bring that up, and this is too much, so we're going to do that. It's like the green kind of goes into the gray. Okay, and then down here is really green, so I'm going to take the medium green of that color that's up here, which was made with light blue, light yellow, and white. And I'm going to put it down here. Like that. And this becomes fairly white, so I'm going to throw some white in that. It's two layers. There's one here, and there's one here. And there's a little bit of that white here. Also, it's a lot lighter down the edge. You can see it that we did it from that part there, but we're going to wait until we fill in this part here. So that part is kind of a cross between a cream and a green. So we've got the cream green here, so we're going to add a little more cream on top. Cream on top. And I'm going to scumble that. Notice how I'm not doing really tiny pointy strokes unless I'm on the edge, because you don't see the tiny pointy parts of the feathers in the body. You only see the mass of them. Okay, now we're going to put that edging. And the edging, in the photo, it looks kind of whitish, but it's really not. It's really a very light gray. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some light gray. Let's see if this is light enough. Yeah, I think that works. And every once in a while, we'll just put a little bit of a poke out so that you know that he is made up of individual feathers and not just a round mass. I also want to do along here because I hadn't done that yet. Put a few pokes out. I tell the kids it's called a polka-doodle. Do some polka-doodles. I like this guy. All right, now I want to put a shine in his eye. We have one shine already, that's a gray. We're just going to take a pure white, and I'm just going to make a dot. Ooh. Okay, and his beak needs to be a little more white in some parts. Not all of it, just some of it. Okay, now we need to work these feathers here, and we're going to use that same color that was here that we were using because it's the same type of feather. And just, oops, I got a hair on my brush. Just going to do a few. Oops, needs to be lighter. So I'm going to add some white to that color. You know, it is a neutral, so it's okay to add white. When you're doing a pure color, that's, let's say you're doing a red and you need to do a light red in there. You can't just add white. First of all, it'll make it pink. But other than that, it will dull it down. Now, when it's a neutral, you kind of do want it dulled down, so you can use the white. You know, a lot of places say, don't use white, throw out your white. Well, you know, it's okay in some theory, but not in all. And we got the darks already tucked in there, so we're just going to lay in some lights on top. Okay, now this part here comes into this feeling of almost like a cradling, and it's really white in the center of it. And that actually travels down here. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do on the bird is we're going to do a little more highlights into the darks there. So there's a little scoop of a highlight here. There's a little bit in here. And we're just going to, and this is just light blue. So it's like a cerulean with a little bit of white in it. Watch your values, because that's a highlight. Remember, this is his light side. That's his dark side. All the lights I was talking about over here I was referring to as reflected lights. These lights over here are highlights. And sometimes, you know, the photograph doesn't quite show it, so just throw it in if you feel it needs to be there. Just don't overdo it. And we don't want to lose this tail in the darkness here, so we're just going to, actually it's actually quite light. It goes down. Oh, you know what it is? There's a dark one here, and then there's a light. So we're just going to do that. So that's slightly different than the photograph, but like I say, it's your painting. Okay, now we're going to work on this guy. What is that guy? It's like a stump of some kind. So I'm going to take the number 2 Filbert Master Stroke, and I'm going to add oopsie, it's over here, a warm, now I need to put a reflected light, because this is our dark side, so there's reflected light in there that the photograph is not going to show you. So I'm going to put it in myself, and I need to lighten that color a little bit. And I'm just making this up. It's not in the photograph. I want to keep it cool. So I used alizarin crimson and some burnt umber and a little bit of white. Not much, just a little. Now let's throw in some darks. For the darks, I've got here, I used alizarin crimson and hooker's green. You can use dark brown, dark blue. I find that I just really like the hooker's green with the alizarin. It's also a purple that I use sometimes, depending on, you know, if it's like, say, an ocean scene. Okay, so there's that. Now we're just going to add a few little details. We're not going to go crazy on this thing because we don't want to take it away from the bird. Even though we have a lot of details in the photograph, it's your decision not to put them in. So, let's see, I mixed those somewhere. I think it's here. So I'm just going to throw in just a little tiny bit so it's not just one layer of paint. And this is just a green gray. Let's throw a little bit in here, even though it's not there. I kind of feel it needs it. And then we got some of this to go in here. And kind of scrub that in there. And then I'm going to add some highlights to the leaves because they are on light side. This isn't light because it's a dark color. It's actually probably really darker in real life, but because the light's hitting it, it's coming off as a gray. But there's also some areas where the light is just touching it. So I'm just going to do that, that. And right along this edge, okay, and there you have it. He's done. Cute little bird. See you next time.